How's it going? Today I'm talking about the number one muscle group to exercise if you only have time for one. This is Running to the Castle, a podcast for injury-prone Run Disney runners on a journey to running magical miles. Join me, Dr. Allie, as I share the secrets I've gathered as a runner, doctor of physical therapy, and coach. You'll learn the exact ways I get my clients to the castle strong without feeling broken or held together with KT tape as they cross the finish line. Okay, so obviously the ideal situation is that you are exercising your whole body. But I get it. If you're new to exercising or you only have time for one because life, right? I get it. So if if I were to pick one major muscle group for runners to exercise, especially runners with knee problems, but really any leg problem, this is the number one muscle group I would choose. And I'll start off by saying that it's because of how diverse the movements are for this muscle group. If you look at the muscles, there are three muscles that make up this group. If you were to look at a list of what they do, they rotate your hip outward, they rotate your hip inward, they pull your hip forward, they pull your hip backward, they pull your hip away from your midline, and they pull it toward your midline or across your body. It literally, this group of muscles literally does all motions at the hip. And so you get your biggest bang for your buck with this group of muscles. And that's why I chose this group of muscles to do. So you may already be thinking of what muscle group you think I'm going to talk about. And you're probably right. And that's because the majority of people recommend it. I don't know what profession or who started really digging in and getting this message out there, but they were spot on. So I'm glad that they did. You know, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but this one in particular really hits the nail on the head of what healthcare professionals have been saying for years, running coaches have been saying for years, and that is your glute muscles. So your glute muscles are made up of the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius, and the gluteus minimus. They are named as such based on their size. So maximus, think maximum, largest. Medius, think medium. It's the middle of the of the three. And then minimus, think minimum, minuscule, minor. It is the smallest. And they are literally named based on the size they are compared to each other. So the gluteus maximus is the biggest one. That is the butt muscle that the majority of people think of when you look at somebody's rear end and you see it formed and shaped. You know, you see watching the Olympics, you see Simone Biles has not a flat butt. She has a large gluteus maximus. So that's the one that you typically see. Then you have your gluteus medius, and that's layered underneath the maximus, and your gluteus minimus is also layered underneath the gluteus maximus. So you have these three muscles that when they work together, they work to stabilize the hip. So if you're standing on one leg, they work together to stabilize your hip. Mainly the gluteus medius does that based on how it attaches to the thigh bone. It is the one that keeps your pelvis level from side to side level. So if you're standing on one leg and your hip drops to one side, that is a glute medius strength and stability issue on the side you're standing on. So opposite hip drops down when that gluteus medius is weak, okay? Gluteus maximus is a powerhouse. That one is going to give you power to have speed. It's going to give you power to jump. It's going to give you power to propel yourself forward. So that's one of the biggest reasons why running coaches, healthcare professionals who work with runners say to strengthen your glutes? It's because this gluteus maximus is a massive powerhouse to propel you forward. So as opposed to your hip flexors pulling you forward, your glute max can push you forward. And that's why you want that forward lean position. You don't necessarily want a complete upright position for good form running. You know, if you see any of the Olympic track stars right now, they have this typical forward lean, this slight forward lean. And that's so that you can use your gluteus maximus and the other and the other muscles of your posterior chain to propel yourself forward. You can push off the ground and go forward. That's why sprinters have such large gluteus maximus muscles, because they work those like nobody's business to be able to sprint so fast. So working your glute muscles will give you power, will give you speed. Working your glute muscles, and this is the reason why I really like it, is because it will take the pressure off your lower legs. Okay? Now, that may seem counterintuitive because it's so high up at your hips, but what happens is, because of the movements that your hip can make because of the way the glute muscles pull, your hips are going to pre-position where the rest of your leg is in space. So if your hips and your glute muscles are weak, and I'm using those synonymously right now, your hips and your glute muscles, I'm using those synonymously mainly because that is the largest set of muscles to control the hip. There are many other hip muscles that do work with these glute muscles. However, they are so small in comparison. You know, they're not as small as hand or foot muscles, but they are small in comparison. So they just don't have quite as much oomph to them. So if your hips are weak, if your glute muscles are weak, then your foot is not going to land in as good alignment as where they would when your hips and your glutes are strong, which means your knee is not going to land in as good alignment as it would if your hips and your glutes were strong, because your hip will pre-position where your foot and your knee are going to land in space. If your hip is weak and so your leg crosses the midline when you land, well, to make up for that position being more midline than neutral, then your foot is going to have to either over pronate or under pronate. So you're either going to really drive that foot down into the ground, or you're going to roll that ankle outward. And when your foot rolls inside or outside, pronates or supinates, well, now your knee needs to do the opposite of whatever your foot just did to make up for it. So if your foot pronates, well, now your knee is going to have to change position to counteract that overpronation. Or if your ankle supinates, which is the opposite of pronation, and it's a roll outward, well, if that foot supinates, well, now your knee is going to have to do something the opposite of what it normally would do to counteract that supination, all because of where your hip decided to start placing your leg. Now, if you have strong glutes, your leg is more likely going to hit in a good neutral alignment underneath your hip than if it was weak. Now, of course, there's always variation in the ground, in what you're landing on, that does play a part. But if we're saying everything else is equal, well, if your glutes are strong, you're going to stay in better alignment. So then your foot and your knee can also land in what they deem as normal alignment as well. So your glutes are going to give you power, strength, and control over where that leg lands in space. So if you have knee foot or ankle problems, yes, strengthening the knee, foot, and ankle is important, but those might be strong. They just were put in a situation that they weren't ready for. So if your knee is strong, but you're having all of this knee pain, well, look up higher, because if your glutes are weak, your strong knee never stood a chance because it's not put in the position to demonstrate that strength. It had to alter its movement, its orientation, its alignment, all because of weak hips, all because of weak glutes. So you get your biggest bang for your buck by strengthening your glute muscles, because it gives you that power, that speed, that stability, that good alignment, all with just exercising one set of glute muscles. So that's all I have for you today. Stay tuned, because I'm going to be doing a series all about glutes, what exercises to do, what movements to make sure that you're tackling, what position should you be doing these glute exercises to maximize their benefit. So stay tuned over the next couple of weeks.
As always, thanks so much for listening. That's all for now. Talk to you soon.